So I have just been so inspired by your work, and I would love to hear what makes a for you from your perspective, and feel free to share like a little bit about yourself or whatever if that feels relevant, but what makes your practice a practice as opposed to not a practice?
Okay. Yeah, just first, thank you again for your invite, and I'm very happy to share and break the bubble a bit of our, their hearts, real virtual hearts coming from your hands. Yeah, just breaking the bubble a bit from Instagram and from like what you're doing and what I was doing. We didn't know each other until like a few weeks ago, so that's quite exciting and cool to see that bubbles are crossing. And yeah. So what makes my practice something that is a practice opposed to what is not a practice? Was that the question? Okay. I would say that the main point is decision, like deciding to do it. So it's not something that happens randomly, but there is something that I, to a certain extent, deliberately have to decide every day, like, okay,
recording in progress.
Today I'm doing this. So I think this is the big difference to something that is not a practice. That I have a clear decision, I have an intention, not an intention in the sense of like, today I want to feel joyful. Well, would also work, but really like an intention of, being alive and leaving with. I was thinking about this yesterday, actually. I was playing tennis for the first time with my partner, who used to play tennis when he was a kid, and we were visiting his parents, and so he gave me the racket. Is that how we call it? Yeah. So we're just like playing with the ball, and I was just thinking, wow, this is the thing I live for. It's just for the life energy, for the fact that I can do this. And this comes with a decision also, like the small decisions that I make every day that allow me to step into this place and play with this record without feeling ashamed for myself because I was so bad, or without putting pressure, but just having fun and enjoying it. So yeah, I think that's decision and intention, I would say.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this a lot with my own practice because on one hand, there was a time in my life when I was doing a lot of like professional dancing, but also really rigorous yoga practice, where it seemed to me there was a pretty stark difference between my practice and my life. Mm-hmm. And it's like kind of like what you're saying, where it's like, for me, there was a time where the practice was like, okay, now I'm deciding to begin to do my practice. And in this practice, I'm attempting to kind of like what you're saying, feel myself, get to know, whoa.
What's going on your Instagram? It's like,
I don't know. It's weird. So my practice is, or this is the past tense, but it was, I want to feel myself. Mm-hmm. I want to get to know myself a little bit more. I want to become more aware of things that I'm not yet aware of. And I want to also move through a process. So those things kind of like were required for me to feel as though I had done a practice.
I see. Mm-hmm.
And I often felt that when I wasn't intentionally doing those things, I wasn't practicing. I was just like living my life, and that wasn't a practice. Mm-hmm. And as I've been getting older, and as I've been studying more deeply the practice, it's almost like they start to spill into each other, mm-hmm. And the more I practice, the more I realize that actually there's an opportunity to do those things, to feel myself, to become more aware of the things I'm not aware of, to move through a process at any given moment.
Yeah. Totally.
but it's kind of exhausting for me to always be doing it. And so I still think that there's a difference. I can say, oh, I'm always practicing. Like, I'm practicing when I'm mothering. I'm practicing when I'm partnering. I'm practicing when I'm whatever. And it's true to a certain extent, but I do think that there's something more like discrete, I think is the word, like specific about the, the practice.
Yeah, I really find this idea interesting. What you said about the fact that the practice spills into your life, as if it would be something separate from each other. And I think to a certain extent, it could sound like it is, right? I think the way maybe movement dance practices are presented in general, it seems to be something that we do in a certain place with a specific clothing, with specific people, and you have a guide, a teacher, whatever. So it creates like a frame, right? Like this is the practice, and then the rest is the rest. And I have a similar experience. I think the more I do the things I do, and the more I leave, it feels like the decisions I make, let's say, within a certain frame. Let's say I go train now. I go do some strength training. That's a very specific thing. So the decision that I make, just the fact that I made a decision of going to the training, this has an impact in everything else that I do, right? So I think when I say also about decision, it's like it's not like a deciding, like I wake up and say, let me decide what I'm gonna do today. This also happens, but it's a bit different. It's more like a decision towards more life, and then like towards more energy or towards more presence. I don't like really the word more because it sounds a bit like optimization somehow, like more. But at the same time, sometimes the words are just like, it's just a bit like a trap. So you use the words and you have to reevaluate the impact they have, if they're helping you or if they're not helping you. But
Totally.
I think yeah.
Totally. I was talking to somebody yesterday about, depending on who I'm speaking to and the context that I find myself in, I will use different words.
Yeah.
Of course, I will move differently. I will react differently in different environments based on the information that I have. So yeah, words are not finite, and I find that in this 2025 internet mayhem, words become more powerful and more weaponized and more delicate and more nuanced, and just kind of like, but I really relate to what you're saying about this idea of choice. So one thing that I've learned through yoga practice is that the basic idea is that you have a choice. And if you think that you don't have a choice, then you're stuck, essentially. And so we do the practice in service of remembering that we do have a choice. And then, and then it's like what you're saying, it's not necessarily I'm going to decide to feel a certain way or do a certain thing, but that kind of bigger overarching choice of I have a choice. I simply have a choice, right?
Yeah.
And it's like that remembering, it's like, it makes sense why the sun happens every 24 hours. It's like we forget every freaking day. It's like, oh, remember you have a choice, And it's like, I've been doing a lot of work also recently about the kind of the different cycles that are moving all the time. Like in my body, I can have a cycle in my wrist and then a completely different cycle in my ankle as a metaphor for the fact that I'm moving through these daily cycles that are 24 hours and what that requires me to do versus the cycle of the moon versus the cycle of the seasons. It's like all these cycles, and each cycle I think is an opportunity to remember that choice, that basic choice that I'm not actually stuck, and that choice also comes with this kind of responsibility, this ability to, I don't know if it's ability to move, but something like this. And I also think, the reason why I call my practice movement medicine is because the word dance is so stuck for many people, which is, I personally think it's sad, but like it just is what it is. I notice how much that limits people's ability to be creative when I use the word dance versus when I use the word movement. And my understanding and my perspective so far is that as long as you can move two things specifically, your eyeballs and be aware of your lungs breathing, you can absolutely do. What is this stuff that's happening? Jesus.
I don't know, but it's very funky. Yeah. Like
Keep talking. But those two, access to those two movements, the movements of the eyes, which is, either the window to your soul or the top of your nervous system or whatever you want to call it, the fact that we can move these is huge. And not just move them, but use them in terms of depth, right? Like how far can we actually see? How close can we see? What is that range of motion in our vision? And so that's huge. And then the lungs. The lungs are going to be automatic, but we have massive influence over them. And that also comes with like responsibility. So can I sense, can I be aware of, can I feel my lungs breathing? And that's my breath. And that's literally just my inspiration. And so with these two things, you can do movement medicine. You can move in a way that unlocks your creativity, that heals you, that makes you feel alive, like what you're saying.
And this has a lot to do with choice, right? Like realizing that you can move these specific parts of your body that you're mentioning now, and that you have a certain, again, it's a word that could be tricky, but a certain level of control in the sense of like taking the gear, like rum, and now I'm going to drive that way, which is something very close related to any creative process, right? It's the ability to sensing rhythm, like rhythm in the sense, well, what you say of the rhythm of the nature. It's just like sensing that you have your rhythm that is going to be different from other people's rhythm. And realizing this, I find is realizing that my life, my creativity processes, they have their own rhythm, and they are not attached to, like, let's say, the rhythm of the week, like Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, or they're not attached to weekends. Like they don't care. Like creativity doesn't care if it's Sunday and you're busy trying to relax. So I think this is also like, it has a lot to do with choice in the sense that okay, I perceive there is something else, like something that I can choose myself, and it was not chosen. It's not like pre-chosen for me. Like the 9 to 5, let's say, schedule was kind of pre-decided. Someone decided it. This is the things that we're not deciding, they were decided already. So it's like, okay. And I found this is an ongoing process. Like I don't think I mastered that. I think I'm always like in this constant conversation with the parts of me that want to follow the structures or the decisions of other people. Of other instances that are like the traditions, the things that are creating the world as it is. So it feels like it's a constant, dialogue, a constant conversation, instead of like, I'm just gonna do my way, At least this is my I cannot do that yet.
Yeah, because the reality, or a reality, whatever, is that the structures that exist.
Yeah.
And
just as simple as it is. Yeah.
As simple as, exactly. And so I've also been thinking a lot about how these structures that exist, the difference between what is, which I call nature, it just is what it is, and then what ought to be, which is our ability to imagine, our ability to have abstract thought, our ability to use metaphor, and tell stories. So there's what is, and there's what ought to be. And I think, especially with my personal experience of spending a lot of my life in cities and in houses and apartments, right? So much of the structure that comes in through my eyes is an attempt to an attempt to incarnate, that's not correct, but an attempt to make the abstract real. In other words, houses, straight lines. There's no such thing as a straight line. It doesn't actually exist. It's an abstraction, and we're trying to make it happen. And it works to make houses and roads and, you know, street maps and all these things. And it's also a beautiful spiritual thing to imagine a straight line and to have the feeling that you can move upon a straight line. It's a, you know, it's an act of art. But so I've been thinking about how there's so much of the information that's coming through my eyes is this representation of what's abstract. Squares and lines and boxes primarily, and how that affects my movement. You know, because in order to choose something, well, I was going to say, in order to choose something, we have to be aware of it. That's not true. But I think in order to make a better choice, it's nice to be more aware, you know, of like what we're choosing. And so much of our movements are not really aware. We're not really aware of how we're choosing to move. It's kind of automatic. And it's automatic because it's based off of the people that we see and how they move. And it's the structures that we see, not just the physical structures that I'm talking about, but the interpersonal social structures that exist that make us move in a certain way. And so when we're thinking about nature, and I've been here on this little island in Thailand for like 8 months, and so much of the information that's coming through my eyes is just what it is. It's not an attempt to form the abstraction. You know, it really just is the plant. It just is the river. It just is the water flooding over or whatever. And I'm kind of taking all this information in, and I'm noticing how deeply it affects my movements. And you know, I'm sure a neuroscientist or whatever would be able to explain why this is, but it's like, it's incredible. And I'm just thinking about, wow, I spent so much time in New York City, like never really leaving the city. And
This is where you grew up?
I was born in Boston, but I lived in New York for 10 years, and then in Los Angeles, which is also a city, but it's a different city, for 8 years. And then in Tel Aviv for 4 years, and now Thailand. And then in a few months, we're moving to Spain. So lots of movements.
Yeah, I find it, I also can relate to that description of like this perception of something is different when you are in a natural environment, like with shapes that are curvy, with things that are changing all the time also, right? Because the building stays, like bam, the line stays. And a tree, I was reading yesterday, I'm reading this book about, it's actually quite a famous book right now, The Anxious Generation from Jonathan Haidt. I'm not sure if this is the name. Anyway.
I've heard of it. It's on my list of like 10,000 books that I'm trying to get to.
Yeah, I get it. I also have one. You know, like the ones that you do, like the people working for the kings in cartoons, they do like this, and then they roll like. That's my book list. Anyway, so I'm reading this book, and he was talking about this concept of anti-fragility and how. Anyway, the image I want to get to is the trees. They made an experiment, and then they grew some trees in like a sphere, like a sort of a closed system. And the trees, they would grow, and then when they get into their mature age, they would just drop. You know, they would just like fall. They wouldn't grow further. And he was seeing that the missing link in this closed system was the wind. There was no wind to push the trees and make their roots become stronger. I know, it's like, I was just like, wow. So I was just thinking, yeah, I mean, this is the difference, right? Like when you have stress, when you have stressors, like the wind, and for us humans, it's also a lot of different things. But just thinking of the trees, it's so simple, because you need this to grow stronger and get like these strong roots and stuff. Yeah, I was just so impressed by this image. And I was just thinking now also what you said about the movement. It's just it's not that we are like away something else in this natural ecosystem, right? I mean, sometimes again, it's the framing, right? Like humans, they are like doing this because they can create with their hands, they can make fire, you know, like we have all these almost superpowers. But we need as much wind as a tree, you know, in a metaphorical sense, to grow stronger. And if we are, yeah, protected within our closed systems, living indoors, being with the phone, like this kind of things, for a long period of time, then this has consequences. It's like the most natural thing. It has consequences. So I was just one last note. I was recently, you know, hiking with my partner and the dog, and I was just thinking of this. We spent like the whole day outside, and I was just thinking that when I was a child, I grew up in the countryside of Brazil, in a small town, and it was still an urban town. It was like 200,000 inhabitants, so quite big, but also quite small for Brazilian standards. And my childhood was basically playing inside because there was a huge danger, imagined danger, or like supposed danger for kids playing outside back then where I grew up. So this also had consequences for me, like being outside, being in the nature, in the woods. So it was super scary for me, like for a long period of time. And then life came and just said, put me outside, and I'm very grateful for the change, but it was not obvious. So again, it's choice. Yeah.
This idea of the wind is so beautiful, and kind of like the metaphor and also the reality with these trees that would just kind of drop dead. And it makes me ask myself, okay, so what is my wind? You know, what is the thing that pushes me the right amount? Not so much that it pushes me off the cliff, because I've done that for many years, you know, but the right amount that it gives you that kind of that good stress. And I think I find myself in certain communities that I guess would be called like wellness communities, and sometimes teetering on the edge of like new age, blah, blah, blah. And there's a lot of talk of like the feminine and the masculine and like all these things, which is interesting to a certain point. And I find though that there's this desire from a lot of women who are rightfully exhausted because they've been operating in a certain way where it's like the structures that exist are what I call the patrix, not the matrix, but the patrix. They just are, they exist, right? And there's a blindness to seeing women as the other, even though that is the default. It's like you're talking about arbitrary choices that have been made for us, you know, like the 9 to 5 or this or whatever. Anyway, and so there's this kind of this huge wave of women in this kind of wellness, new agey world who are rightfully exhausted, but they don't fully know exactly why, and they're trying to like help themselves, and then they end up kind of going to the other side instead of this automatic pushing like the wind. They had so much wind for so many years that now they're just like, I just want to relax and be passive and not make choices. And that's an expression of femininity or whatever the fuck. And so it's almost like there's this pendulum that is like swinging so far back, and this idea of like, don't ever push,
Yeah.
you know, or don't ever pull, don't ever put forth effort. Everything should come to you. And it's like, what? That's so weird. Yeah, so this idea of like, well, what is it? And using the word and the metaphors of wind is just so creative and inspiring. And I think it would be so helpful for some of these women, part of me included, you know, where it's like, we're so exhausted from pushing that we want to just not push. But actually, how do we find that right amount of push that keeps us building our capacity to be resilient and building our capacity to stay creative and stay tapped in? And I'm also thinking about these 5 basic neurological actions that Bonnie Bainbridge Cohen came up with, and she talks about like the satisfaction cycle, and like within the first 2 years of development, children ought abstract, ought to go through these movement patterns, these actions, which are yield, you know,
Mm-hmm.
yield, push is essential,
Mm-hmm.
reach, grasp, pull, and then release, you know, or whatever. And so push is very, very important. Wind is so important. Although there's something about the metaphor now that I'm just like thinking, it's like the wind is something that I don't think plants choose. Like, whereas for us, and that's what's cool about the difference between plants and people, you know, plants thrive when they're lucky and stuck. You know what I mean? If plants are stuck, that's like great news for them.
Mm-hmm.
And if they're lucky, that's awesome. You know, the right amount of wind, the right amount of sun, the right amount of whatever. But people decay and kind of get disembodied and start dying prematurely if we're stuck and lucky. We need the opposite to thrive. We need to not be lucky. In other words, we need to develop our skills to do something. We can't depend on luck because that's going to hurt us.
Mm-hmm.
And then we need to be able to move, I think.
I love that. I think. Well, you need to question your own thoughts, right? It's also an important skill. I wanted to go back to one thing that you said. So, like, what's the? I think you asked this question, like, how do you, well, in your own words, but how do we do with women or, yeah, people in general who ask these questions of like how much wind do I need, or going like in the extremes, right? Because what you described seemed to me like there is this one movement that goes towards, like, movement in the sense of a culture that goes towards this da 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 da, and the other that goes towards like don't just, you know, like this kind of thing. And I think the one answer that comes to me, or one thought that comes to me, is again rhythm, because even the wind is gonna push you, but not every day. It's gonna, you know, it's gonna be there strong, but not every day. It's gonna be stronger, but not, you know. So it's like, it's again, it's this rhythm, it's this cycle aspect that the work that you're doing on sounds so essential to understanding that we also have this rhythm inside of us, and discovering this rhythm. It sounds like, I think it's, for me, one deep layer of the work with movement, because movement offers me also, it's also like a kind of a sparring partner, you know, like if I have this idea that I go like every day, every week, or every 2 days, 3 days, I don't know, I do some kind of bouldering, some kind of training, like going in, like going high, back down, you know, like this kind of training. And then I have this idea, but then I have my rhythm. And then I have this, you know, constant like dealing, okay, but now I feel differently. And then, no. And then again, like, am I relating too much on my emotions? Like now I feel like this and this, and then I just want to cuddle, but I could actually go. So I think this is a conversation that a lot of people have, and I have guided or worked with many students that are like entering a movement journey. And this is one question, especially in the first years, when they start with something that is more regular, like making this decision more regularly that they want to move. It's like, but now I feel tired, and now I feel this, and now I feel that. And it feels like there's this, you know, like ongoing quest. What is the right thing to do? And then you have the wind. You know, it's like, it's just, you don't know. And then you have to experiment. I think this idea of experimenting with things, you know, and just getting your curiosity on fire instead of what is the right answer. That is something very precious, very, very precious in this whole, in this process. And maybe it's like a middle thing, like between this contrast between the black and the white. It's like this rainbow area where a lot of things can happen. You know, you just, sometimes you're tired and you stay home, sometimes you're tired and you go training, and sometimes you're tired and I don't know. Yeah.
Wow, yeah. It's almost like curiosity is, I love that phrasing of curiosity. You said curiosity on fire, right? Yeah, oh, I'm going to take that. I'm stealing that. it's so beautiful because it's almost like the curiosity on fire is the perfect complement to the desire for righteousness. It's like it's either the antidote or the perfect complement, you know? It's like, and if those two can kind of swirl around together, yeah, yeah. I think it also goes back to what you're saying about, it's like, as long as it's not the default, meaning somebody else didn't choose this for you, then we are tapped into creativity and curiosity. I had a yoga teacher many, many, many years ago tell me there's only two important ingredients for any practice. And I was like, what? Tell me. I need to know. and she said curiosity and enthusiasm. So those two, it's almost as if she was saying, like, you're going to have to figure out whatever you need to do to make sure you have a little bit of those. But as long as you have a little bit of those, you can sustain your practice forever. You know, and I was like, whoa, that moved me. That really moved me, because it was like, okay, yeah, I can find curiosity. I can find enthusiasm. And those are the things that blossom into a really robust practice, whatever that ends up looking like. So you were talking about how your work with people who are beginning their movement journey or practice or research or whatever. And what I understand about your work is that you help people, you guide people through a movement practice, people that are new to it, one-on-one, as well as in a group setting. I'd love to hear from you, because I do something similar, and I'd love to hear from you, like, what are your favorite things about that, and what are maybe some challenges, or, you know, anything really you want to share about your teaching work.
Mm-hmm. It's funny. I think I shared recently on a text on Instagram something about that for a long time I thought that what excited me about this work as a teacher or as a facilitator was to see people doing things, you know, like when I was let's say learning to, I don't know, some specific skill like a handstand, you know, like I want to get the handstand, or and I would expect that when I would be teaching, this is the thing that would make me so excited, like, my student got a handstand. But then I realized this is actually totally not what gives me the enthusiasm. It's more like this very, very slow, quiet shift. I call this the quiet shift that happens, that makes people want to try again. They want to come again, you know? They want to join the class again. They want to kick up again. They want to. And then I had this example recently with a student of mine. She's 55, I think, and she does like individual training, so one-on-one here in Berlin. And she was hanging, like we found a tree. So we're looking for a tree, and then I said, let's try to hang from the tree. And then I jumped. I was like, yeah, I think the branch can hold. So she tried as well, and she couldn't really find the branch. So I helped her. And then she was holding for a few seconds, and then she tried it. And then she was like, no, I want to try myself. No, I want to try to hold. And for me, this is the wisdom of the inner child. Like the thing that comes through, that is like, just let me try again. Like, go, don't help me now. You know? And I think this is the most, not the most, but one thing that moves me a lot is really noticing that this shift is happening. You know, like it's happening inside of someone when they get a bit like, no, I want to try it now, and like, let me, don't help me. And it's just funny because I had the student of mine, and then 2 days later, I was doing my practice outside in a park, like next to a playground. There were some kids playing, and there was a spot like where, you know, you could also do other stuff, like a clear floor. So I was just doing my practice there, and then two kids approached me, and they're like, can we practice with you? And I was like, yeah, sure. And then they were like, what can we do? They were asking me. I was just like, I don't know. What do you want to do? And then they said, we just do what you do. It's like, okay, which is a very, very human thing, right? to like copy, to just do what you do. So I was like, yeah, cool. And so they were just behind me, and then we did a little parkour, and there were a few moments where they couldn't do something like hanging or jumping to hang or like climbing something. So I helped them. And then they saw, I can do it. And then exactly the same thing. No, now I want to do it alone. And then, they were just doing a few times, and within like a couple of minutes, it was not a long time, they could do what they were so scared of. So I think this is really what moves my practice, is to notice this quiet shift, because this is like a little seed. It's like noticing that you can do this, that you can go through this quiet shift. I think it gives you like this insight into yourself, and the capacity of change and adaptation and power, that we have.
That when you were talking about your student, your client, the woman that you're working with, who's 55, and that moment where she wanted to do it by herself, I could feel the water coming out of my eyeballs. It's like, because it's really, it stirs me, because I think there is definitely still, I'm 39, mother of two, and there's still so much that scares me, which is fine, but I'm very grateful that I have a practice that slowly, little by little, is like moving towards that, and attempting to have more and more of those moments of like, all right, let me try again. It's okay. Like, I'm not going to let this defeat me and make me small. And so I think it's such a universal process, and I think that we had a lot of built-in, natural, for lack of a better word, rites of passage for us as people that oftentimes happen literally in nature, where we go through that process in a very big way of like, we're confronting a fear and we have to move through it, at our own pace, in our own way, of course. And I think that modern day society, it's like we have to create those rites of passages on purpose. And that's why people go to yoga studios, and that's why people do CrossFit, and that's why people are doing any kind of thing that is called an extracurricular activity or a hobby or whatever, because self-development, whatever you want to call it, it's like, though we have had to kind of like artificially recreate these containers, these spaces, these mentorships, these whatever you want to call them, where we can move through that process. So it's like, it's such a gift to be able to witness those mini rites of passage for people. It's everything. It's everything. And I miss that so much, because I think much of my work, where I found like this enthusiasm and this curiosity, was having the privilege of witnessing that, like, for my students. And I think, one of my best friends, I've spent many lifetimes with her, co-teaching and co-facilitating. And there's something about our chemistry, our dynamic, where we get into a room and I am so much better of a facilitator because of her. And she also is so much, we like really bring each other up, and because of that dynamic, we've witnessed like really big rites of passage that have happened for people. And it's exactly this thing of this feeling of like, I actually didn't do anything. She didn't do anything. We just like set the parameters and like brought enough of our own self practice, and then we witnessed that. And that's very inspiring, because I think it would be very easy to slip into depression or anxiety if you didn't witness some of these rites of passage, in some kind of a regular way. So for me, like, teaching people movement, whatever that means, is selfish, in the best sense of the word, it's like, and I mean it from a place of like genuine, like, wholeness. Like, I am so fed by the work of witnessing that, that moment. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to teach people how to do a handstand, and then they're going to feel good. It's like, it's not the handstand, but the handstand is a metaphor for something challenging. Generally for people, it's like literally flipping your whole world upside down and then asking you to hold it, so it's like the handstand is a really good example of a rite of passage, like a mini one, like a small one. you know?
What would you say, like besides this one, what would you say was it's your yeah, what moves you when you teach?
Um, I think the exchange, that's why it goes back to this like selfish thing. When I teach, it's a practice. It's a part of my practice. And what I'm attempting to do is open myself so much that I guess in some ways kind of become invisible. I don't know how to explain this. Like the the more I am seeing the people in front of me and almost becoming them, like I don't know how to, like I see somebody's pinky finger and I see how their pinky finger is connected to their core. And so because I see that, I will say something to encourage them to recognize that connection. And so that's what I mean. Like I become them. Like I want to be so not me with my neuroses and my personality and my, you know, injury in my right knee or whatever, that I become like this kind of, I don't even know what it is, like a vessel, I guess, where I'm just like being with the people that are here. And then I feel there's such an exchange. There's like this, I guess the vessel isn't the right metaphor, because if there's an exchange, you know, there's something between us that is happening. But to me, that's what I'm attempting to do, so that I'm offering to them not so much like, again, my personality and my problems, because that, if I'm not careful, I can do that. Like I will do that. In fact, any teacher who teaches is going to project their problems onto somebody if they're not aware of it. And you know, in the way that we give an adjustment or in the way that we use our words or whatever. And so the things that move me the most are having a clean exchange. I don't know how to explain it. Where it's like at the end of the practice, I've been moved, and I've also had to move. And when I say that, I don't mean like my physical body through space, because usually when I teach, I don't want people to watch my body. If they do, they do, but it's always very intentional. I'll be like, hey, now everybody stop, put your eyes on my body and observe something. And then that's when I'm using myself to the best of my ability to communicate something. But otherwise, the bulk of my teaching is through words. And so the poetry of words, the metaphor of words, the precision of words are so important to me as a teacher. And I'm trying to use those and my eyes to kind of get into their body and have an exchange of some kind. So I don't know. I think that's like kind of like really vague in some ways what I just responded, but
No, I get it, and I think this is like I get something what you're saying, like something arrives here, and yeah, I don't know why, but and there's this image that comes to me from what you said, that we're like walking landscapes in a way. You know, you are like your mountains, and I really like the image of the landscape, you know, from the class. So we have your mountains and your waters and your trees from Thailand, if you stick to that image of the landscape. And I think when you meet other people, you're always meeting their landscapes also. And sometimes you can notice like that there is sometimes people landscape is like also like the busy street in New York, you know, this is like they have skyscrapers and this like crazy loud landscapes, and some other people have more like, I don't know, flowers, and it's just like a small river. Depends of course on the day. But I think when you're teaching, for me it feels like, how can I adjust to the landscape? Like how can I sort of help support this landscape to thrive? Again, how can you be the wind? Or for me, there's something in there.
yeah, big time, you know? And I think it goes back to a little bit what we were talking about in the beginning, you know, letting it not have to be the right thing, you know? Because I think the best moments in my teaching experience are those where I have completely trusted my intuition to try to support somebody without like, oh, because this person said it, or because this method has been tried and true, or oh, because like I believe this thing or whatever, because even my beliefs, unfortunately or fortunately, are going to be a projection of my neuroses and my personalities. So the kind of the cleanest exchange that I've experienced from a teaching perspective, where I fit the role of the guide and this other person or these people are fitting the role of student, right, is where I've completely trusted my intuition, in terms of what I'm going to offer them, and that also depends on recognizing the landscape, like you said. It's like, okay, well, this person is going to require some more wind in this area of their body, and this person is going to require some more rooted branches, or rooted, roots, like the roots of a tree. This person is going to require a little bit more water based on what I see, and just trusting that my dedication to this craft of movement research is going to come out, is going to show up as it needs to, without having to like depend on a formula or something like this. I think for a lot of times, I was talking to another person about this recently, I think I've done a lot of hiding behind systems that weren't really mine. Like, for example, the yoga has a system, yoga has a philosophy, there is a whole setup and infrastructure there. And I think for many years I was hiding behind it. It's like, oh, well, I know this system very well. And I did, and I was able to teach it and explain it, but it wasn't coming from my pure creativity. And so for me, movement medicine is an extension of everything that I've learned from the yoga practice, but it's an opportunity for me to really continue to practice stepping into that, like, okay, you can trust yourself. Yes, you can say this thing. Yes, you can hold people,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think it's also it seems for me like a common path of people who work with movement is that they go through systems, like somehow closed systems, and then they find their own thing that also arises from this clash, right? Like from this conflict of, I don't know, but I'm here and I like this, but it's not really me. So there's some kind of a rubbing that that happens often, that makes us go into in our own path, let's say. But this is also part of your path, right? Like yoga also shaped you and in your teachings, your life now, I assume. And I think it's also finding I also think sometimes when I look back, like I started dancing hip hop when I was 12, and I'm 37 now, and I just kept on going. But for a long period of time, I was just like, I was dancing choreography, following, like routines, and not really expressing much. I would feel so uncomfortable with any kind of improvisation. And I think like, wow, why didn't I learn that before? But that's my history, like it just moved me towards where I am now. Yeah, it's just a bit like this sort of kitsch thing, like this, like, yeah, this is like this is the history, but that's how it is. Like, it's just like with the history of the world, the history of nature. Things are, it's not like this happened and it stays there, but it's happened on layers, right? It's like, and all sort of coming together. Yeah. I like what you said also, with like the movement medicine, how you name it, and yeah, how you see yourself, like in a way, like it's like you're offering yourself, you're offering your intuition, your creativity also for something else that is beyond you, right? And that's so, I think that's also very sacred in a way. Maybe it's also like the purpose of creativity is to like just travel and travel to someone else, or someone else can also travel to someone else, and then things keep happening and keep going.
Yeah, creativity. My physical experience of creativity changed so dramatically when I gave birth to specifically to my second daughter, but also from becoming a mother. when I gave birth to my first daughter, she came out of my belly, so it was a C-section. And then my second daughter, she came out of my vagina. And so that, to me, it was such a different experience. And talk about movement and talk about dancing with someone. With my second birth, it felt like I was in this exchange, right? This exchange of listening to her and moving accordingly and making room for her. And like it was a creative it was the essence of creativity,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
like literally like creating. Um, and so, yeah, I can't remember why I said that. You said something about, oh gosh, it's gone over
Don't
there.
worry, I also have that. Yeah, this is the traveling aspect of creativity. You're like, you jump in and then you're like, ah, and then boom. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah. um, okay, well, let's wrap up with the time that we have. I can hear my babies in the background calling, so I'm gonna heed their call. But
Yeah.
would you like to use these last few minutes to share anything about, you know, specifically the work that you offer, if people want to connect with you and do some work with you?
Yeah. Yeah. So I have work happening online and also in Berlin, where I live in Germany. Um, and online I have one ongoing offer, and I say it ongoing because it's something that is also my practice, to have something ongoing, that is not like I do it for 2 months and then I stop, and then no, it's just ongoing. So it's like, I'm gonna be in the park every Tuesday at 9. I'm also gonna be every Monday and every Wednesday at 12 p.m. German time, um, inside of the what I call the creative body, which is my movement membership, where we meet to move together. And we have, this is my ongoing offer. And also, I think the easiest way to enter into my landscape is through the creative body. And we are like every month we have a different topic, and I explore different things. Right now we're working on gravitational security, which is just a fancy name for how do you move, or how do you adapt and adjust and feel safe when things are spinning. So also literally, so we spin around a lot and move a lot, our heads up and down, our spine. So developing the security in the body, the safety in the body for unsafe or a bit spinning motions. So this is the creative body. And I also have a one-on-one offer, which I call it just the creativity coaching, which is basically going on an adventure together. This is my like in one sentence pitch. So people come in and they have a topic. They have, like, I have a student right now, she's also creating her own business with movement. So it's basically going on quests, on small quests that are very much based on my creativity and on her creativity. It's a very, very cool, exciting and alive process. Really feels like we're in the woods, like, okay, now you do this, now you try that. So yeah, learning all this experimentation, also finding trust in the experimentation, and curiosity on fire. Totally, this is also the base. And in Berlin, I have a couple of group offers. I have also a website, and on Instagram there is a lot of information. Yeah, and I'm a real person, I'm here in my living room, the sun is shining outside, I have a dog partner, I live in a different country. This is not my mother language. So I'm just very human, and all the things. I use words and then I'm scared of them. I'm like, oh shit, did I say it right? Oh, I said love. Shit, I don't know if I can say it. So I'm just very real. Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's so amazing. Well, I told you at the beginning of this call that I'm moving to Spain
Yes.
in a few months, and that will I'm really excited for a few reasons, but one of the reasons is because there's so many wonderful movement things happening in Europe.
Where are you moving to in Spain?
Outside of Valencia, or like in Valencia,
Nice.
but not the city, like in the kind of the countryside there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'd love to meet you in person sometime. We'll see if it happens, if we cross paths, And I think I'm just going to plant a seed, because my main mission these days is to get back into retreats, and to not let the retreats be something that is like inaccessible to a lot of people. And I know that that takes time, because money is a consideration, and also like usually retreats, I find them to be powerful at the 1 week mark, you know. And so to have a week to explore this work together, to be in nature, I think is just so important, especially for those of us who have a female physiology. And I can get into exactly why that is, but spending time with other women in nature is just so important.
Yeah.
And yeah, and so like that work that you were doing, you know, this talk that you have about the landscape, and like I see you on Instagram, like being in nature. I'm just gonna plant the seed, you know, like maybe one day we can create a retreat together, or something like this. You know, just planting little seeds. I have a retreat happening at the end of August this summer for women, and we're going to be doing movement practice and doing yoga practice and going into nature and really immersing ourselves and spending time together. So that's like my next horizon. But it's like the beginning of like the bigger vision, which is having 1,000 women in the Italian Alps dancing together. And like that act of 1,000 women dancing together, even if it's for like 15 minutes or whatever it is, you know, in the context of a kind of like a festival or a retreat or whatever it is on the horizon for me. So I don't know, maybe you'll be there. Maybe you'll offer one of your classes there.
Where are you doing your retreat?
In the Italian Alps, in Tarvisio.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's a place called Tarvisio, and it's like right on the border of Austria and Slovenia. So like culturally, it's this really interesting, rich mix of cultures. Yeah. And it's one of those places that, you know, hasn't yet, hopefully, been bombarded with tourism and things like this. It's still quite peaceful and pristine and spacious and rich. And so that's one of the reasons also I want to take people there.
That's so nice. Yeah, I also thinking like I'm offering a few workshops this year, and they are all in Berlin, and I keep asking myself like, but you know what? There must be other places where I could do these workshops. You know, even though it's like Berlin is just so easy to reach, it's a big city. There's so many things here. There's forest. There's like concrete. But yeah, it's a beautiful inspiration also to hear that you're in this space, open space.
Yeah. Okay, dear Mariana, thank you so much.
Thank you for hosting, for bringing me in, for connecting.
Yeah. Let's see if this works again. If the Instagram, yes.
Mine didn't work.
I don't know what's going on.
I think you have something on, like something modern.
Yeah, I probably like switched a thing at some point and don't know how to, you know, undo it. Okay, my dear. We'll talk soon. Sending a big love. Bye.